Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Better Luck Gamer, and today I've heard your cries, I've heard your pleas. Many of you want to look into the new archetypes that came out in this book, and one of the ones that got mentioned the most was the Cultivator. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Cultivator in the Tian Xia character guide that is going to be releasing here in about a week or so from the time that this video goes live. And I gotta say, as someone who has recently started reading some Manhwa, started reading some Manhua, or whatever the pronunciations are, I've been getting into some of the Cultivator stuff as well. If you want a really good, interesting, like Manhwa to read, Tales of Demons and Gods is really, really good. I'll put an image of it so you know what to look for. It's really good, and I'm not the most knowledgeable, so I'm not going to speak really on what being a cultivator is or what my expectations of being a cultivator is. More or less, I'm going to just talk about what I've been seeing here, which honestly has been excellent. They've made it almost very poetic. Some of the writing here I'm not going to read, but you can see it on screen, and it is just beautiful how they've represented the cultivator. But for those who don't know what a cultivator is, they're essentially like a Central Asian concept, kind of like an esoteric occult researcher slash. So the whole point is improving your body to the point of becoming immortal and powerful and not dying is kind of like some of the big aspects of what being a cultivator is. Many of the stories on cultivators talk about the various journeys people do to attain essentially immortality, live for thousands of years, train themselves relentlessly to no end. It never ends. Cultivation never ends. And well, that would be very hard to represent in a game like Pathfinder 2E that takes place typically in very short time scales. This definitely has a lot of that same flavor. It's really, really good. And I'm sure if you're more curious about it, someone is going to give me an exact correction in the comments below on what the cultivators are. So, you know, I can use some of my misinformation to actually bring more information to the video through the comments. It's a wonderful place, YouTube, honestly. But before we get to the cultivator, first of all, I want to state Paizo did send me a copy of the Tian Xia character guide for the sake of review, but this is not sponsored content. They're not paying me to review the content. They just gave me the PDF so that I can review it and bring more attention to the product. So all thoughts and opinions here are my own. Though, if we're talking about shilling a little bit, Into the AM has given me some really great shirts. They're all a pretty good, nice feeling cotton shirt that has not shrunk. These have gone through the wash like 4 or 5 times at this point, and they're really good. The graphics on them haven't been degrading at all so far, and I've been wearing these shirts a lot. You'll probably know because you've seen a lot of them in my videos, so it's not like I haven't been putting them through the ringer. And they got some really stellar deals. Now, I have a 10% discount you can find down in the description below. That applies to pretty much anything you can find on their site. But they also have a really good deal where you can get 3 of their graphic tees for just under $60 if you use my code in addition, which makes each shirt less than $20, which I think is a really good deal, especially if you like graphic tees like I do. And I know some of my subscribers have already been getting some of the shirts. So if you want to check it out in the description below. All right, so let's go ahead. Shilling done. Let's talk about the cultivator. So the dedication just requires that you're trained in occultism, though it is a rare archetype. And what this means mostly is, one, it's mostly a society play thing. Any kind of things that reference, you know, rare, uncommon, access, all that kind of stuff are mostly for Pathfinder Society. So if you're not in a Pathfinder Society game, you don't got to worry about it. Though, the one major thing about the cultivator is it is a very specific archetype to a very specific style of play. And your character might be very driven to, you know, become immortal, or very driven to find cultivation materials, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So this can create a little bit more effort on your GM's behalf. So your GM always has the right to say no. And that's fine, honestly. There's nothing overly strong. In fact, cultivator, as far as like combat effectiveness, honestly is not that strong of an archetype. What it does bring is a ton of flavor. And I'll read that here. I'll read a little bit of it so y'all can get what I mean. These austerities allow you to refine your body's vitality into chi, the foundation of all cultivation. That's the kind of stuff we're going to see a lot here in the Cultivator dedication. So what does it give you? You do need to be trained in occultism, as I mentioned before, but this does allow you to get expert in occultism, which is pretty cool. So a good skill increase, and you gain the Adapt Self Domain spell. Now, this domain spell predominantly just allows you to give yourself like dark vision, a swim speed, all that kind of stuff. Very handy, but is more like a situational tool than it is like a common combat tool, more or less. So it's very good, but I would say you're not going to use it more combats than you would use it, I would suppose. So yeah. Other than that, it mostly just talks about how focus spells work, so we don't really need to go too far into that. There is one special mention, though, at the very bottom where it says Cultivator focus spells are treated as chi spells for prerequisites, counting the number of chi spells you possess and their effects. So, such as the Jiang Shi's Drain Chi ability. That is not super relevant. I was trying to look around to see how many chi spells this, or like, how many feats might relate to this. None in Cultivator and none in some of the other ones I've been able to look through so far. But I'm going to be keeping an eye out. More or less what you just need to know is these are chi spells, and so you can use them as prerequisites for anything that requires you to know a certain number of chi spells. It's as simple as that. Moving on, let's talk about Immortal Lightness. This one is probably one of my favorite level 4 feats that you can pick up, and it's the only level 4 feat we have here in Cultivator, so you're going to pick it up if you're using the free archetype rule, which, you know, I recommend everyone does. It's really, really good. But this one gives you Athletic Rush, and it treats it as a chi spell. So that's it. But Athletic Rush is really good because it gives you a 10 status bonus to your speeds, and as a part of casting this one action ability, you can leap, run, do whatever. So it has a lot of really good effectiveness. So you can spend a focus point to move faster in stride in the same action. It's pretty good. Honestly, it's a very solid pickup, and a lot of builds could really use Athletic Rush. I think a lot of domain spells are actually somewhat not talked about enough in some of the meta circles because they are really, really good. Next up is Lotus Above the Mud. Now, this one is not one I'm particularly a big fan of, but I do see a lot of the uses for it. Now, whenever you use either Adapt Self or Athletic Rush, you also ignore difficult terrain until the end of your next turn. Somewhat handy, and if you're using Athletic Rush a lot, then you're going to probably run into a combat where you're going to need to get over some difficult terrain. And I will state there are a lot of classes out there that do just create difficult terrain. Heck, recently, if you haven't checked out the video, I talked about the new monk stances that they introduced, one of which being the Kaiju stance, that creates difficult terrain. So if you have a Kaiju stance monk on your team who's creating a bunch of difficult terrain, then Lotus Over the Mud is a really good synergy because now you can move through the difficult terrain that they create. Very solid. I really like it. So Lotus Above the Mud, while I don't think is necessarily going to be my number one pick for the level 6 feats that we have here, is definitely going to be one of the ones that you can synergize with depending on your team comp. Now, 3 Clear Breaths, on the other hand, is very, very good, depending on some of your perspectives of the game. Now, it does require that you have a Constitution modifier of +2, and, of course, the Cultivator dedication. But +2 is honestly not that hard, and honestly, most players should have a +2 at this point. Don't ignore your Constitution, kids. It really is helpful in the game. So, pretty easy to get, in my opinion, but if you're choosing to play a very squishy character, I guess you're going to have to miss out. So what this one does is it gives you 3 general feats. You gain breath control, die hard, and fast recovery feats. Now, these feats in particular are not amongst the most commonly selected general feats. But if you have any of these feats, which I will say many of these feats are actually accessible through ancestry feats, then you can replace any of the ones that you would have gained with Canny Acumen, Fleet, and Toughness. Fleet and Toughness especially being some of the most selected general feats in the game. So, honestly, like, if you have an Ancestry feat that gives you breath control or some kind of background or something, then this is actually a really good pickup. I can see a lot of ways that this one is really good, and more importantly, it gives you access to more general feats that you can only get so many general feats throughout your run. And while these particular general feats I wouldn't say are overly impactful, if you just have some of them through some of the various methods you can get them, then you can pick up things like fleet and toughness in one go. So that's honestly not bad for an archetype feat, if you ask me. And the final level 6 feat we have here is Wisteria-and-peony Reunion. This one is really good because once per hour, whenever you cast a focus spell, which by the way, it's only a focus spell and not a chi spell specifically. So this works with any character you have that uses focus spells. Really, really good. As a free action, you can regain a number of hit points equal to your level plus the maximum number of focus points in your focus pool. This is an insane pickup for any classes that are already looking to get more focus spells. And in addition to this, the Cultivator dedication gives you one out the gate and a second one pretty much automatically if you're using the free archetype. So at minimum, you're going to get your level plus 2 hit points as a free action once per hour when you use any focus spell. This is really good, and I feel like it's going to synergize in a lot of builds, and it's going to make a lot of people keep an eye on the Cultivator. So overall, I'm going to say the Cultivator dedication is really solid just here at level 6 alone. At level 8, we get the Cultivator's Keen Eye. Now, this one is very interesting. One of the coolest things about it is you gain a life sense, which as an imprecise sense, within a range of 30 feet. That's really solid. And if you're someone who loves anime, you like One Piece particularly, boom, we have observation hockey essentially in the game. You can detect people most things anyway, who are alive within that range. I think this is really interesting and really cool. And that's not even where the feat ends, because you also can sense within that range precious materials, which are known as cultivation materials. So if you're not familiar with cultivation media, these cultivation materials are like anything, really. They're anything that has some value that you can use for cultivating, which is to making yourself stronger, all kinds of funky stuff like that. Now, this is where there are a problem with the Cultivator, because these precious materials are not necessarily in the sense precious materials. They can be simple plants. They can be purification of raw elements. There's a lot of cultivation material, like things you can put into the game, and thus the GM is going to have to be, one, knowledgeable on cultivation materials, and two, is going to have to be aware to allow you to put this into the game, essentially. This is where I think the rare part of the dedication really comes in. Now, obviously, you can just make it something as simple as any gems or any like group of gems or random like precious loot the party can find. The GM can be like, oh, one of these are a cultivation material. Now, the biggest point of this is the characters can't really use this for cultivation, which is really weird, and it kind of breaks the cultivator kind of idea. But again, like I said, it's already really hard to recreate in Pathfinder anyway. But what you can use these materials for, as you can substitute these materials as ritual costs for anything that doesn't require a very specific item. So if the cost requires like a diamond worth 500 gold pieces, well, you might be able to use purple grass as a very common one. Purple grass that is worth up to 500 gold pieces in place of the diamond, for instance. As long as that is not a very specific item that is required for the use of the ritual, you can replace it. And any kind of gold cost can be used for this. So this essentially allows you can kind of very obtusely boil this down to, you get to find free money for the sake of rituals as you go through your adventure based on your GM's input. Potentially really good. And this is kind of this second part of Cultivator, as now that we're going to get to the level 10 and higher feats, we're going to see that cultivators actually have a very strong tie-in with ritual casting. Not always, but a little bit. And so that's something you're going to have to keep in mind if you want to go with the cultivator, because like I said, there's not many real combat abilities. A lot of this is downtime stuff or character flair stuff. So Cultivator's Keen Eye leans a lot into that, and honestly is probably going to be a must-take feat, because being able to detect cultivation materials is going to make a lot of the other stuff a lot better. Now that we're hitting the level 10 feats, we're going to be splitting into the holy, unholy cultivators. Yes, most stories about cultivators talk about characters who have to either like go the good path or the bad path, or characters who kind of weave in between. There's not really any in-between options here, but it is a big part of cultivator stories. So first we have the ghost path epiphany, and this requires that you aren't holy, because guess what? We're going to become unholy. And I'm going to read the first part here because it's really cool. Deviating from the orthodox path, you tread an inauspicious descent littered with flowers of death. This heretical choice will in time earn you the enmity and fear of more traditional cultivators. So, yeah. Now you become sanctified with the unholy trait, and you also learn the call spirit and commune rituals, which can be used to contact only undead or entities from the void or the netherworld. If you're not familiar with some of the remaster changes, the netherworld used to be the shadow plane. So shadowy creatures, it's not just like the underworld or hell. That's actually a different thing. So in addition to this, whenever you cast a ritual, you can reduce the number of secondary casters by 1 as you direct the decaying fragments of your own soul felled by your proximity to death to assist with the rituals. So you essentially create shards of yourself that then help you with the rituals. Super cool. And when you do, you must fulfill any requirements for the secondary casters, and you attempt the secondary check normally performed by the secondary caster as well. Now, you can't replace a secondary caster if they are the target of the spell, like with the Atone ritual, but honestly, you're going the ghost path. That's not why you're doing rituals more often than not. So, yeah, full flavor, very interesting, and now you have kind of this ritual aspect to the character. Now, obviously, if you're going to a very ritual style play, the ritualist dedication is probably going to be better. But this is a good add-on if you're just kind of doing things with your martial arts or cultivator themed character anyway. Now, in stark contrast to the ghost path, we have the 3 pecks of dew. And this is kind of in reference to the fact that, you know, people who have who found enlightenment can survive on just the dew of grass and all that kind of stuff. So this one requires that you aren't unholy. So we're going to become holy through this one. And what this one does is you become sanctified with the holy trait. And when you perform the subsist downtime activity, you can use occultism for this check instead of whatever society or survival, depending on your environment. And if you do it in this way, that trait actually gains the vitality trait as you subsist on ambient chi within your environment's dew-laden air and create shelter from solidified emanations of chi. So, more or less, you get to subsist using occultism. It says a lot, but you can take from the flare whatever you will as far as your story and narrative. There might be some implications to these actions. In addition to this, as you refocus, you can also treat wounds at the same time. Though this, I would say, is only on yourself. It doesn't specify, but the whole point is that in the process of like meditation, your healing is much faster. So when you treat wounds in this way, you disregard the need for a healer's kit. This activity gains a vitality trait as you circulate healing chi through your own body or Oh, no, I guess you can do it in another person. Okay, never mind. I had misread it before. So yeah, you can treat wounds as a part of refocusing. That is actually pretty huge. Refocusing is one of the most commonly done things throughout an adventuring day, and being able to treat wounds throughout that is very time efficient. So, and there is medicine related stuff in this book. So yeah, there's some very interesting qualities to this one. Now we have 2 more feats remaining, but I wanted to take this time to ask you guys if there's anything you want me to talk about in this book. I've been looking at the comments every day, and whatever I see the most of, I end up covering the next day. So if you want to see something in particular, let me know down in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, leave the video a like. This is something that helps get Pathfinder out to more people in the Tian Xia character guide book is, I think, one of the best books to draw people into Pathfinder 2nd edition. So if you're watching other content on it, like those videos as well. The more we work together to get the algorithm to enjoy Pathfinder content, hopefully the more people we can draw to Pathfinder, as I really do love this game, and the Tian Xia character guide is a really, really good book. So I feel like it can get some people hyped, and I want more people to enjoy TTRPGs. And as well, subscribe if you like my content specifically. I cover new books as they come out, and I've been dedicating a lot of time to putting out as much TTRPG related content as possible. So if you want a channel that's your one-stop shop for multiple TTRPGs, in addition to just the sheer frequency at which I put content out, then, well, I would say it's a pretty good sales pitch if you want to subscribe to the channel. But let's go ahead and get on with the final feats of this dedication. So starting with the Ghost Path's second feat, which is the level 16 max feats, we have the Bitter Scholars Promotion. A very interesting title, and the more beautiful writing here. I absolutely love it, but I don't want this video to be too long. So when you get to this point, you cease aging, and regardless of your actual existential state, essentially whatever ancestry you currently are, you now register as an undead to effects that can detect undead, such as life sense or spirit sense. In addition, you learn the create undead rituals for the Gasha Dokuro. So if you're unfamiliar, when you learn create undead, the rituals, you learn to create a specific undead. So this is actually pretty good because you learn to make some new creatures. Most of these came out in the Book of the Dead. So we have the Gasha Dokuro, we have the Tian Xia, and we have the Shuguai, which that last one came out in the Pathfinder Lost Omens World Guide. So if you want to see that, then check that book out as well. And whenever you get a success with one of these rituals, you gain the effects of a critical success as well, which is actually pretty immense. Because generally, with the create undead ritual, if it's not a mindless undead, which I believe the Tian Xia aren't mindless undead at the very least, and they're at least 4 levels under you, they become your minions. Now, if it was just a normal success, if they're an intelligent undead, they just don't become your minion. So being a critical success, that's actually insanely huge, and the whole purpose is to start building your army of the undead. So if you want a Eastern style necromancer build, this is probably the way to go, as you're going to have a lot of very interesting choice for undead for your army. Now, in contrast, we have the Immortal Attains the Summits. This is from the 3 Pecks of Dew feat line, and this one gives you immortality as well. And in addition to this, no matter what your actual existential state is, so if you are a skeleton, for instance, you now register as a living creature through such senses as life sense or spirit sense. And now on the light side, we also learn some rituals. You learn the rituals of control weather and plant growth. And you can use occultism instead of nature for these rituals. And on a success with these, you get a critical success instead. So if I was to compare the Ghost Path to the 3 Pecks of Dew path, I would say Ghost Path is honestly more interesting, while the 3 Pecks of Dew does have some really interesting uses of occultism, like for subsisting, for instance, and the ability to treat wounds, which I think is still really, really good. Here at the summit, it feels a little whelming, a little underwhelming. It's just control weather and plant growth rituals are like fine, sure, but I just don't find those as interesting as like specific undead rituals that you can learn from the Ghost Path. Granted, if you're a good character, you prefer to be holy, then this is the route you're going to go anyway. And it's not like these rituals are useless. If we're talking about my own interests, then Ghost Path seems more interesting. But I think both of these are really interesting. And honestly, overall, the Cultivator is incredibly interesting. It's not going to be the combat archetype that a lot of people tend to lean towards. This is very much a flavor-based character narrative. You're seeking immortality. You're seeking to perfect yourself to enhance your chi. Everlasting. You wanna train for 1,000 years. You want to, do all that kind of stuff. That's what this is mostly about. While there are some definitely very handy feats here in the list, This one, I would say I would more focus on if it fits your character narrative rather than for any mechanical benefits. So that's going to be it for the Cultivator. Hopefully you all enjoyed. Let me know what you want to see next down in the comments below. I'm very, very excited to look more into this book for the remainder of the week, as I will be doing more videos every day this week. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and happy cultivating. Bye.